Okay. Good evening, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming and thank you for your interest in this event. My name is Dóra Günzberger and I am a faculty member at the Institute of Politics and International Relations at Pázmány Péter Catholic University, as well as the event organizer at Pázmány International Club. I'd like to welcome our experts today. We have today with us Łukasz Janulewiczcel from University of Kent, Vít Dostállal from the Association for International Affairs in the Czech Republic or Czechia, Tomáš Strážay-val from the Slovak Foreign Policy Association, and Zeöld from the Budapest Fellowship Program. Our discussant today is András Rácz, a fellow faculty member at Pázmány Péter Catholic University, as well as a scholar at German Council on Foreign Relations. The topic of our discussion today is the Visegrád cooperation, as it celebrates the 30th anniversary of its foundation. So just before I hand on to András, I'd like to ask the audience to kindly shed questions, whether they have any, or if they at any point have any, with András. So you can send your comments or your questions to András in the chat. And at the end of the talk, at the end of the discussion, he will raise your questions to the experts. So András, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dóra, and good evening again to everybody. Thank you for joining us today evening. And just a few technicalities, because this is a webinar format. Technically, it's not possible to switch in who those ones who intend to ask questions. So that's why Dóra has asked you to just type in your questions to the chat room, either now or at any point during the discussion. And thereafter, we will read out those questions to our speakers. Regarding the format, I will ask first all the four speakers to deliver their opening remarks in some 10-12 minutes, interpreted in a flexible way, and thereafter we will move to a Q&A session, moderated one of course, and depending on how active the audience will be in asking questions, I will just downgrade my own questions in order to leave enough room for the discussion. Altogether we have 90 minutes for the discussion today evening. Anyways, it's getting late. However, still, this is hopefully going to be a good 90 minutes. One more remark here. We are fully aware of the fact that in 2021, it's somehow kind of odd to organize an all-male panel. We really tried to do it. Otherwise, we really tried to invite female experts. None of them could make it, unfortunately. So we are aware of the problem. Next time, we will do better. This is a lesson learned. We apologize for those ones who might get offended by that. That's a problem. We will fix it for next time. And regarding how to proceed further, I would like to ask our speakers using basically the geographical order. So first, Łukasz Janulewiczcel will start, and thereafter we go further south to the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and thereafter Hungary. Needless to say that, of course, this is a public event. We have no control over who is in the audience. So this is something that the audience needs to be aware that this is a public event, a recorded event. So also from the GDPR's perspective, I think it's important to point out that yes, we are recording the whole conversation, including the questions that will be asked. This is something we have to declare, so we did it. At this point, without any further ado, Łukasz, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, András, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this. I haven't been doing this for a bit now, so I'm happy to be back in Budapest, at least digitally, from London, and to join a lot of colleagues from my time in the region again. Yeah, so speaking from the Polish perspective, or the elephant in the room, or sometimes the elephant in the porcelain shop. Poland, I think, is always a bit of a tricky candidate in the V4, looked at with always some suspicion from the three other perspectives. So I'm particularly looking forward to hear the Vít, Tomáš, and Zsombor on how also Poland is perceived, because that is always a little bit of a disconnect that we sometimes have in the format from the Polish views and the perception of the other countries. I think one thing that I would want to start with, and one thing that we have to consider, maybe not a singularly Polish point, but I think nevertheless an important one, is that looking back at the 30 years that we kind of celebrate this year, that an important development we have to deal with, looking at the format, is that the D4 is becoming less and less the only game in town. We have a huge mushrooming of formats. So I think this is one of the interesting points. I think, I mean, this is kind of my personal observation. Maybe you will set me straight and correct me on that, but I think the output on if I'm looking at the think tanks in Poland, for example, writing about broadly regional cooperation affairs, I think the other formats are taking a bit of a more prominent role recently. So definitely the 3-seat initiative is currently far more sexy and worthy of attention. Whether that is deserved or not is a different question. I think we are also getting probably across the region. This is not a point that is necessarily tied to more attention to a competing format that is more active, but I think the whole issue of China and at least attention in a way to the role China plays into the 17+1 format, not necessarily its activities but its existence, is probably also, at least that is my impression recently, getting much more attention in that regard. So I think this. I mean, one of the issues that we have to deal with the V4 is this kind of the more developing scene. And I think from a Polish perspective, maybe there are always a certain concern. I remember the debates when the Slavkos triangle started to become more active, and certain concerns about competition and what this will mean for the Visegrád group. I mean, we also have another more recent format that popped up, the Central Five, that has popped up over the last year, which is basically Slavkos plus in a certain way, which also includes Austria and Slovenia. But on the other hand, I mean, if we look at Poland also has contributed to another small format, the Lublin triangle, with Lithuania and Ukraine. So I think on the one hand, we always have maybe some knee-jerk reaction, not even necessarily from politicians, but maybe from the commentariat and some analysts about new formats popping up and creating any potential competition. I don't think that this is really a serious issue that is, as it is sometimes made out to be. So I think what I think is quite a good way to look at it is to borrow a term that we have in discussed British politics, or it used to be British politics, promiscuous bilateralism, is how British policy towards Europe was described, at least in the 90s and earlier. So I think it's a good way of looking at it from all our perspectives, sort of a promiscuous multilateralism that we're engaging in, even though with the defenders of Christian family values running around, any concept that there's promiscuity in it is probably not going to catch on. But I think it's nevertheless a good way of looking at it, and I think the growth of the formats is also in a certain way an acknowledgement that we have of the strengths and limitations. I mean, we've all been writing about these things for years, so it's always a bit boring to take this middle ground position that I think many of us as analysts take on the Visegrád group, this rather pragmatic approach of, you know, where it works, where it doesn't, but we keep talking and looking for ways to make it work. But I think the mushrooming of the format is also a bit of an acknowledgement that these kind of flexible groupings that work on specific issues and don't work on others is also an acknowledgement of how regional cooperation is I think, viewed in all capitals. That you find the right partners for the right topic and try to work. Of course, Visegrád cooperation has a far more kind of, despite not being an institution, leaving the Visegrád Fund aside. Well, it has the weight of history at least, and I think that is and also the as neighbors we will always have a lot of topics that we have to work about. I think a certain problem that I see in the debate over recent weeks. I mean, this is not the only event that's been running on this issue. I think one certain concern that we have, listening to some, for example, politicians from the government camp in Poland talking about Visegrád cooperation is, and this is definitely something that I would be very interested to hear what the colleagues from the other countries are thinking about. That is that we still have, this is not a singularly Polish issue, but I think the strong emphasis on shared history, on shared values, which especially from a Polish perspective, I find speakers emphasize quite a lot, giving an impression of cohesion in areas where there is not as much necessarily. I mean, I think there's a lot of projection from a Polish perspective of shared values, or shared values maybe a broad point, or defining values. But I think the drawing on joint historical experiences is, I think, a little bit overdone in this extent. I think we have a lot of shared history, but not necessarily. I don't think that the emphasis of joint history is really always a helpful way, because I think even the joint experiences of communism, where there was a lot of overlap, I think the communist experience, which is always drawn as this kind of joint starting point, even in the broader region. I mean, this also seeps into the discussion of the Three Seas Initiative, where it's, I think, even less appropriate. I think there were a lot of joint experiences. There were a lot of very similar experiences, but I think there is a lot of nuance in all of these historical experiences that, for example, have been shaping views on the matter. I think looking forward, I think it is. I think what might be interesting, also looking at it from London, is the future of the V4 Plus format and kind of a broader issue of how the more global outlook that is being kind of talked about. I mean, we had on the specific Brexit issue or the British issue, I mean, we started having a couple of meetings on the level of the Europe ministers, I think, with Wendy Morton here, the Minister of State for Europe, and in the Foreign Commonwealth, now Development Office. So there have been some developing meetings. So I think that might be I think this will be an interesting thing to see, even though we should also be aware that, for example, now with the big review of British foreign policy due very soon, the biggest interest seems to lie, at least that I've seen a little bit from the Foreign Secretary here, that there's more interest in the Nordic and Baltic states rather than a focus on the V4 in that regard. So I think we will have to see how all of this develops. I think the Polish role, I think will be quite interesting to see how the focus will lie out. I think there is a bit of I think a lot will depend on the ability of Poland to how not to over project so its own role, which is I think always a little bit of a risk, even though I think this is a temptation that is also perception of the format that, you know, consultation is great and important, and it's going on, and of course it's necessary and important. But I think it's also misused and abused. Not every meeting, you know, a great breakthrough and hails any sort of great achievement. Even though a lot of course is happening on the lower level, which is probably less shiny and less visible. So I think it will also be interesting to see how exactly the overlap and the prioritization will play out with the Free Seat initiative. I think the connectivity agenda has caught on in a way which is quite natural for neighboring countries for this to be a fruitful future cooperation. I mean, we've been talking about the high-speed rail between the V4 for a very long time, and I'm afraid we will also be talking rather than riding it for another very long time. But well, fingers crossed, and yeah, looking forward to hear the thoughts from the other countries about us nasty Poles being imperialist leaders.
Thank you very much, Łukasz, and also thank you for being so exactly on time. I really like the way how you put the pragmatic approach. Where it works, where it doesn't, but we keep talking nevertheless. I remember a few years ago, we called the same approach, actually 10 years ago, we called the same approach to the art of disagreeing, so that the cooperation could still function even if there is some disagreement between the member states over certain issues. And certainly also about the V4 Plus format. Later, after all the initial remarks have been done. But coming to the initial remarks and going further south a bit, Vítek, how does the whole thing look like from a Czech perspective, particularly the questions that Łukasz asked, and overall the future of the cooperation? I'm really looking forward to your insights.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. Well, right now we are in the Czech Republic in the middle of a quite interesting discussion on what does the Visegrád cooperation mean for the Czech national interests, and how it contributes, or how it is to it, or how it is a problem for the Czech Republic's position in the EU. I think that the situation is quite similar to the one in Slovakia, as much as I can observe it, and I'm looking forward to Tomáš's contribution. And first of all, I would like to explain what is the state of the debate, and I will try to explain to you as well that, in my opinion, both narratives miss the main point of what the Visegrád cooperation means for the Czech Republic and how it is beneficial. So, if we look at the mainstream narratives of the Visegrád cooperation in the past 30 years, then it nearly always served the main foreign policy goals of the Czech Republic. At the beginning, after the foundation of the Visegrád cooperation, we had this main narrative of the return to Europe, that the V4, at that time V3, is something which, thanks to the mutual cooperation, could bring us back to the European family and help us with the integration in the EU and NATO, which was the true at the end. You know, we escaped from the geopolitical vacuum in the Central Europe. We signaled that there is some cooperative format, that we are not going in the direction of some kind of balkanization in the Central Europe, and the main narrative of the Visegrád cooperation contributed to the main goal of the Czech foreign policy. There was some discussion about the Visegrád cooperation, whether it is useful or not, but there was an approval of the Central European cooperation as such as a good way, how to approach closer to the Euro-Atlantic structures. Then, after the accession to the European Union was granted, there was this notion of the Visegrád as a regional brand, something what shows us, gives us the place on the map of Europe. So that was as well very well acknowledged. But nevertheless, the 15th anniversary of the Visegrád cooperation was perceived as, with some question marks. What is the purpose of the Visegrád group in the European Union? Since the goal of the V4 was to, at the beginning, to integrate ourselves with the EU and NATO. Then there was this narrative of the V4 as a model for another regions, as some kind of an inspiration for the Western Balkans, for Eastern Partnership countries, something which something with which we may share our good experience with the European integration, etc. Again, it served the main purpose, the main goals of the Czech foreign policy, and it was acknowledged by the political elite. And then suddenly we had the year 2015 and the so-called refugee crisis, where the V4 in the following years in the debate about the refugee crisis, V4 got the image of a troublemaker. It very often voiced joint objections towards the way how the refugee crisis and the migration policies were portrayed from the Western European countries or from Brussels. And that was the year how, when I would quote one diplomat, which I cannot quote, but he explained the situation in a way that suddenly politicians fell in love with the Visegrád cooperation. And that was the problem. What we saw in the Czech Republic was a huge drop of the popularity of Chancellor Angela Merkel, and quite a significant rise of the popularity of Viktor Orbán. Mainly for the Czech population, Viktor Orbán was a person which is recognized from pictures, from the political debate, from the Facebook pages, etc. Then the Visegrád cooperation became a story of two projections. I like the way how Łukasz described how the Visegrád, into Visegrád there are projected many ideas from Polish foreign political thought and how it is used. It is a similar case in the Czech Republic. One projection was that the Visegrád is a great thing because it can defend us from refugees, from bad Brussels, from all crazy ideas coming from Brussels or from Western Europe. The second projection was that the Visegrád is all bad, and that it is the source of all our problems, that because of we are in the Visegrád cooperation, we will backslide in our democracy, and that to put it simple, we as the Czech society, we in the Czech Republic are not to be blamed. because all the problem comes from the fact that we are within the V4. Yeah, I overestimated. That I create a small caricature from the both projections or understandings of the Visegrád cooperation. But there is a lot of overestimation in how the debate between these two ends of how we can see the V4 is made, and this is the main problem, because now V4 is part of the polarization. It is politicized. It is there is huge polarization on what the Visegrád cooperation is. What shall we do about it? There are voices calling for leaving the V4 because they think that it represents, it represents the image of illiberal or ill democracies, and that it is the source of the anti-refugee rhetoric, which is also here in the Czech Republic. And the other end thinks that or believes that the V4, that through the V4 we can achieve something in the European Union, that it is the best coalition ever, and that we shall rely on it, which is as well a huge hallucination, which might be true on the European Council level, but when it comes to the lower levels in the Council of the EU, it is not possible, and we need more allies to achieve something. So I would stop there, and in the follow-up part, I may discuss also, or I may add something to the debate on how we should, in my view, perceive the Visegrád cooperation, and what is the good thing on it, the real good thing on it.
Thank you, Vít. We already got a question from Alex Kajalski, so you already have something to think about preparing for the Q&A session. And Tomáš, I mean, Vít just mentioned that the year 2015 has kind of been a watershed moment for the Visegrád due to the refugee crisis and its domestic implications in many Central European countries. So I would really be interested in hearing your perspective also on that question, besides, of course, on how the whole cooperation and its present and also the future looks from the Slovak perspective. So please, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, András. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you, at least in a virtual way. I would start with the saying that the Visegrád project as such always was a political one, because it were the political leaders who actually established the Visegrád cooperation. So it started as a political initiative, but then it started to actually descend down, meaning top down, and the establishment of the International Visegrád Fund, which actually happened 9 years, if I am counting well, after the establishment of the Visegrád cooperation as such, was a clear actually sign that there is an intention to bring other actually stakeholders to the cooperation and to enlarge the scope of the Visegrád cooperation. And this balance between the political and I would call it non-political or practical Visegrád had been maintained more or less until 2015. I think that there already is a certain kind of agreement among us that 2015 and the migration crisis changed a lot, also in the Visegrád cooperation. Our political leaders, and there is no need to name them, started to use it for domestic purposes, the Visegrád cooperation. Of course, the topic that was widely used was the migration crisis. It worked better in the cases of some V4 countries. It worked less in the case of the others, but still there was an intention to politicize the Visegrád cooperation on the cost of other dimensions of cooperation, I would say. In addition to that, the politicization was not the only problem. The problem was that the V4 became actually the tool in the hands of the prime ministers as the most important representatives of the countries, individual V4 countries. Of course, we can argue that the presidents are, you know, the main representatives, but in practice, it's clear that these are the prime ministers, and they actually used the V4 as the tool for their purposes, for their political purposes. So I think this is one of the problems that needs to be addressed somehow. And there are the voices also in Slovakia, but also in other countries, namely in the Czech Republic, that are or who are not really fine with the utilization of the Visegrád trademark in such a way. Because, and now I'm moving to another point, the issue is that that the Visegrád as such started to be perceived in a different way by individual V4 countries. Now, as Łukasz mentioned, we have plenty of new initiatives. We can then start a discussion whether this is good or not. I think this is rather a good thing, because if they are meaningful, they can contribute to the development of regional cooperation and can actually help to develop some joint projects. But the natural question is, are we speaking about the multiplication of initiatives or already the inflation of initiatives? Because if we take into the consideration the newest one, the C5, well, frankly speaking, from Slovakia's perspective, there is almost no added value of this initiative. It has certain meaning for Austria because it can use it as a platform for communication with the Eastern neighbors, EU neighbors, and mostly for Slovenia because it's the first format in which actually Slovenia can apply its full-fledged membership. But for Czech Republic, for Slovakia, I'm not so sure, maybe for Hungary it also has some added value. But the point is that the countries, the V4 countries, have now more options to choose from the formats of cooperation. But I would say that Poland is doing so, definitely, as we heard. The Czech Republic is doing so as well. And Slovakia has already started doing so as well. From my perspective, the most, I would say, Visegrád-oriented country in the region nowadays is Hungary. But the characteristics that Hungary assigns to the Visegrád cooperation, I called it the musketeer characteristics, like one for all and for all one. This is, I would use Vítek's remark, a hallucination, because this is not based on reality. This makes us think of something that cannot be achieved because there is not the agreement among all the stakeholders that is required. So when looking at this ground from Slovakia's perspective, we are the smallest country. Usually I do speak as the last one on the V4 events because Slovakia is the small one. But the V4 is also based, and the Visegrád Fund is also based on a nice principle that is called common rights, common contribution, which makes all the V4 countries or put all the V4 countries on the same level, which should be preserved from Slovakia's perspective. On the other hand, we, and now I'm talking about all regional formats that do exist in Central Europe, we as the fully integrated EU country, I would say, we are missing the format where we would just have the partners on the same level. Because if you look at particular regional formats, everywhere you do have countries who are on different orbits of European integration. And this also includes Slavko, because the Czech Republic is not in the Eurozone, and so on and so forth. So from this perspective, the V4 doesn't actually differ so much from other regional formats. But of course, to search for common denominators on EU-related policies, there is a noticeable tendency to look also to other formats, and especially to the Slavko-3 triangle. Here the question is, to what extent does the Czech Republic consider the Slavko triangle to be, the added value, and to what extent the added value? And foremost, Austria, to what extent Austria really feels good in this format? From my perspective, the C5 format might fit better to the Austrian interests, because they have all the Eastern neighbors, not just two of them, right? But this is perhaps a speculation. It shows how the discussion on regional cooperation looks like in Slovakia. Again, the camps, there are two camps, we can say. The ones who would rather push for the sober perspective, pointing on, the achievements of the Visegrád cooperation, the added value in some sectoral policies, for instance, it brings, but also to the shared, history and also the long track record of the Visegrád cooperation. While the others would not only opt for other regional formats, in some cases, especially when it comes to EU-related cases, but also introduce, a completely new, I would say, point to the discourse. And this is ad hoc or more permanent coalitions with totally, detached countries from when we take into the consideration the geographic perspective. So just to create interest-based coalitions and then somehow work on this level. This, however, doesn't solve, the regional policy Slovakia has, because it is squeezed among the V4 countries. And of course, we are the ones who have the borders with all three. But this is saying something. But in addition, the Visegrád countries, after Germany, are the most important trade partners for Slovakia, all of them. So when you look at top 4 trade partners, you have Germany and 3 other V4 countries. So we just can't escape the region and knock on the door of Benelux or Nordic cooperation. Geography won't let us go from the region. So from my perspective, the task, and not only for this year, but also for the years to come, for Slovakia's foreign and especially European policy, would be to maintain certain balance between, the European integration and actually the commitment to the European integration because of the membership in the Eurozone and other structural characteristics, and developing at least neutral relations with the partner countries in the region. As we see, the achievements of the V4 that were widely used were, the decrease of the tensions between individual V4 countries. Recent days has just shown that the issue of the double citizenship is back in the discourse between Slovakia and Hungary. So perhaps this was also premature to say that regional cooperation or the EU membership will be the panacea, for everything. I belong, and I can say that openly, to the group that rather would like to pursue the sober approach. And I think that the Visegrád format as such was designed very well with its weak institutionalization, flexibility, and so on and so forth. I think this is also why the V4 managed to survive quite a difficult crisis in the past. And I strongly believe that it is going to commemorate the 35th and 40th anniversary as well. But on the other hand, if there are problems related to politics or to the misuse of the Visegrád trademark in the V4, I think this should be openly named and put on the table. This might be the way out, how to preserve the format working and how to make actually those voices who are quite often right when criticizing the political leaders of the V4 for the misuse of the trademark a little bit calmer. So summing up, we can have several regional cooperation formats in Central Europe. If these are not competing ones, but complementary ones, no problem with that. But we have to prioritize each of our countries, which format fits the best to our interest. And I think that for some of us, it might be V4. For some of us, it might be something different. But definitely V4 can be preserved as the way and as the verified way of cooperation in many areas. So it can also bring the added value to individual V4 countries in the future, and hopefully, because there still remain opportunity, you know, that nothing is linear, so some of the V4 countries may change actually also from political perspective. I'm also speaking about my country, because we are now in the process of so to say, a little bit instability from political perspective these days. So nothing should be taken for granted for ages. And if we count this into the consideration, then we can also think of the Visegrád, of the future Visegrád and its place in Central Europe. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tomáš. And you know, this is kind of something kind of a personal moment for me when you spoke about the need for a sober cooperation and sober assessment. And I remember all the meetings we have had in the Think Visegrád and other format. And I remember the voices calling for a sober approach and not to over-dimensionate and also not to overhype V4 either in the positive and the negative sense. And it's quite staggering for me personally. In 2021, we are back at this stage, unfortunately. I really hope that there will be a way out for the cooperation as well. To touch upon a more happier topic, I mean, as a researcher, I already started to think about an article about the musketeer characteristics and the limits of the musketeer characteristics. How nice it would be to really work out or elaborate in a paper what are the limits of this approach, that all for one and one for all. Hopefully, this is something we could perhaps think about. But before moving to the standard practice of writing papers, there is one more country position or country assessment rather left. So, Zsombor, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, András, and thank you all for these wonderful presentations. My job has been made a bit easier because of you three, because you've touched upon points I wanted to touch upon. But before I start, I need to make a disclaimer here. About 15 years ago, I was granted a scholarship by the Visegrád, International Visegrád Fund. So basically, what we're talking about in academic way has been, let's say, a huge addition to my professional career in a sense. Like without the financial help of the International Visegrád Fund, I wouldn't have been able to travel in the region and basically get to know other Visegrád countries. So basically, what I'm going to say, although in some cases it will be a criticism, but my intentions, besides besides the criticism, are to make everything better in a sense of positive criticism. Concerning the short answer to how does Hungary see the Visegrád cooperation, I think that the V4 for Hungary will remain one of the focal points in the forthcoming periods, basically because of two reasons. One of the reasons is that this year, from the 1st of July, Hungary will once again hold presidency of the rotating presidency of the Visegrád group. So basically, Hungary will be entrusted by the others to work in the name of the group and to develop a program. I think that the program is already on its development and will roll out in the forthcoming month. The second is basically somewhere in between a domestic political comment and an international political comment. V4 has become in Hungary a part of the domestic political discourse / parts of the political communication that has been going on in the past couple of years, and this is something I think that the current government cannot, basically let it go. However, there is two criticisms to this: one internal, one external. Both of them have been already addressed. The internal is that some regional / Visegrád partners of the country see the V4 differently, as the Hungarian government does, and the external is that the V4 is basically too small to effectively deal with contemporary security and a few issues. Łukasz mentioned the 3 Cs initiative, and I wanted to make a reference to this. The background for this, so basically, I think concerning the road ahead, it could be possible, and I would really like to see a soft power approach with, that focuses on the International Visegrád Fund, but it will definitely needs, it will definitely have some kind of limitations. So what happened in, I would like to recall what Vít said about the 2015 event. So Vít, you called it a refugee crisis. I'd rather call it a mass migration crisis. Basically, we're talking about the same thing. An external shock hit the Visegrád countries that actually, politically speaking, led to the development, or led to a situation where the Visegrád cooperation, Visegrád group, could occupy a place in the European political scene. Basically, you said that it was basically boiled down to a distinction in between the German standpoint and the Hungarian standpoint. I understand it, and I share this. Basically, this raised attention towards not only the Visegrád group, but towards other policy areas as well. The need to incorporate at this moment into the analysis that Brexit hasn't happened yet, but after 2016, basically, I think the Visegrád politicians knew that whenever Brexit happens, it definitely will gain, it will lead to the Visegrád corporations gaining attention at the European level. And basically, this added attention lingered on in 2016, where the next year the Hungarian presidency kicked in, the Hungarian presidency of the Visegrád 4 kicked in. So we're talking about 2017, 2018. And I make a side note here. So traditionally in Hungary, foreign policy is not really, something that people consume on a daily basis, with two exceptions. First and foremost, whenever there's something on the platter that concerns the Hungarian communities abroad. Secondly, when there is Hungary on the platter itself. And basically, in the last Hungarian Visegrád presidency of 2017-18, the Visegrád cooperation became a part of the domestic political discourse / political communication that actually led to a really enhanced visibility of the cooperation. The problem is not this. The problem is something I would touch upon later on. I need to make 2 notes here. First, blurring the line in between domestic politics and international politics has been a common practice for many European and non-European countries as well. So, once again, the problem is not here. Second, and this is an institutional comment, the programs of the V4, individual V4 presidencies, are a result of an internal debate over various versions of the program draft. So basically, what the country presents at the very last towards the general public has been agreed on by all parties involved. Diplomatically speaking, in 2017-2018, one of the, I think, the most added value to the Hungarian presidency was the enhanced use of the format V4+, meaning that on a case-by-case, non-Visegrád countries were invited to Budapest to have a talk about sectoral policies such as migration and so on and so forth. Henceforth, the invitation of the Egyptian side, for instance, or the Israeli side. What I was missing actually came to the whole cooperation during the next presidency after the Hungarian presidency, and that was the Slovak. So I was basically, let's say, quote unquote, missing 2 really important partners. One of them was the German partner. So basically, we've talked about the importance of the prime minister positions, the prime minister meetings during your V4 events. The V4 Germany Prime Minister event happened during the Slovak presidency and not during the Hungarian presidency. Even more interesting, there was another meeting that took place in Bratislava, the visit of the Japanese Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. Please note the dates, April the 25th, 2019. And if you look at the family photo, you see one really familiar face missing from the picture, and that is Viktor Orbán. So basically, Viktor Orbán was not present at a really interesting and really high-level meeting. Question arises, where was Viktor Orbán? Viktor Orbán was in Beijing. This is somehow a bit slight contradiction as compared to what the last Hungarian national security strategy says about the Visegrád cooperation. I'm sorry, this is all in Hungarian. So what the document is talking about that was rolled out in 2020, that this is an utmost national interest of Hungary to maintain connections inside of Visegrád 4. And basically, in order to uphold these and in order to develop these, the Hungarian side is looking at, or basically is trying to enhance cooperation with Poland, both bilaterally and both inside the framework of Visegrád cooperation. But whenever they were looking at, similar Polish documents, here we have an official document. That's the same document, the National Security Strategy of 2010 from the Polish side, which lists the Visegrád cooperation as one of the possibilities. So it's not an exclusive, it's one of the possibilities, how it deals with the Visegrád cooperation. And the second is basically also a slight political comment. One of the chief foreign policy advisors / national security policy advisors to the Polish President Andrzej Duda in recent years was Krzysztof Szczerski, and I think about 4 years ago, wrote a book which has the English title European Utopia, the Crisis of Integration and Polish Ways How to Mend Them. In this book, if you look at the titles of the subsections, there's nothing said about V4 cooperation, but about the Three Seas Initiative, there is. So basically, he dealt with the topic of the Three Seas Initiative in a separate chapter, and basically, seemingly, I'm sorry, disclaimer here, I haven't read the book fully, although it's available in Hungarian. This is completely my fault. I am not suggesting that the V4 is not in the book. I'm making a comment as compared to what level, the V4 is referenced in the book as compared to other regional organizations. The main problem, I think, or not problem, the main situation, how the Hungarian government treated the Visegrád cooperation after the end of the last presidency was that they didn't let, let's say, this pallbearer role go. And this is the situation what Tomáš was referring to a couple of minutes earlier, that there are constant, basically, disputes in between first-line politicians of the Hungarian government and politicians from other governments, for instance, from Slovakia. What is the V4? What is the V4 brand? Is the V4 brand misused or not misused? Thank you very much for now. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Zsombor. Just kind of a brief technical remark. Hungary's new national security strategy adopted last year does not yet have an official English translation. That's why we had to rely yet on the Hungarian version. So this is not negligence. This is just the public unavailability of the document. Technical remark over. And I'm very happy to announce that we have a lot of questions coming in. But before we move to those ones, please let me ask all the panelists two kind of not surprising, almost compulsory questions, but every time when we assess the history of the Visegrád cooperation, we need to touch upon these questions as well. So the first one is, how do you see the potential or the possibilities of enlarging the Visegrád cooperation? So getting some new countries on board in a permanent structured way. So not just V4+, but let's becoming a V5, because this has long been on the agenda, or long has been popping up on the agenda from time to time. So I'm really interested to hear your opinion first on the possibility or the assessment of enlarging the V4. Łukasz, please.
Well, very short answer, no. this is, I mean, you're absolutely right, András. This is an eternal question that we always have. I think, you know, what we've been hearing from everyone on the panel, I think is a great emphasis on the kind of flexibility, so to speak, of the format. And of course, there are always these discussions about, you know, from Ukraine to whatnot. Of course, it pops up. I think it is in some parts also part of the politicization or the individual politicization of the format in individual countries. So whenever it's convenient, such an idea might pop up. Oh, you know, we have a good friend over here, you know, that we want to make a symbolic gesture. Let's discuss whether they could join the Visegrád group. I don't think that this discussion is you know, ultimately going to lead anywhere. I think I would really file it under this kind of you know, politicization of the day, and yeah, I think the V4 Plus format gives absolutely sufficient flexibility to
Thank
keep
you,
going.
Łukasz.
Yeah.
Vítek, how does it look like from the Czech perspective? Any enlargement of the V4?
Not really, though we have a president at the Prague Castle who very often surprises us with some novel ideas to which country the V4 might be enlarged. And Miloš Zeman used to be a proponent of the enlargement towards Slovenia. But frankly speaking, I do not see any reason for enlarging the Visegrád cooperation. As we learned also from our contributions today, there are various narratives of what the Visegrád group is and what it should be, even now with the 4 countries. And these narratives are quite often contradictory, even mainly if we take into account also the understandings of the Visegrád cooperation coming from, for example, the opposition in the Czech Republic or the opposition in Poland. So bringing more voices into this debate would not, in my view, produce any added value. And my question is also whether any country is ready to invest so much into the Visegrád cooperation. Because once someone is coming into the group, then the country has to really make a huge effort to socialize itself in the V4 format. That means to improve and enlarge also the bilateral links with all the 4 countries, to really learn how to behave in the V4 working groups and the number of formats which are there in the Visegrád group, the Think Visegrád included, of course. And so my question is whether any country is ready to do that, because very often the partners see as the sorry. It is already was the good night kiss. Sorry for the interruption. But yes, so I think that the partners speaking about joining the V4 often think about the high-level formats, but do not see all the working groups and the ministerial meetings and the agenda, this semi-institutionalized agenda, which is below the top of the iceberg.
This was very, very useful. Thanks a lot. And for me, this was an eye-opener. I personally never thought about this more technical aspect. So really, thank you. Tomáš, how does it look like? The same question. I mean, from the Slovak perspective, any enlargement of the V4?
No, it's not the question of the day, because there are more pressing issues, as it was already mentioned. From Bratislava's perspective, actually, particular attention is paid to the development of V4 Plus format, especially with the partners that do play certain role in European integration, especially Germany and France. So I think that if German Chancellor and French Foreign Minister, for instance, do recognize the V4 and do recognize that it is meaningful to meet with the representatives of these countries, then it also says something about the V4 as such. Though I would again appeal that no exaggeration or too high expectations should be connected to the V4. So it's not the question of the day, and we are fine with having the V4 Plus format.
Thank you, Tomáš. Zsombor, are you also fine?
Yes, we are. So basically, the short answer to your question is no. A bit longer is basically what Vít was talking about, but I'd rather flip the coin and add something to it. But 1.5 years ago, I happened to be in the United States for other reason. But from time to time, the Visegrád cooperation actually came up in relation to the Three Seas Initiative. And one of the most blunt answers I've ever received from someone who's actually an American citizen was this, concerning the role of Visegrád for, inside regional corporations and Central Europe. The only role, quote, I see is that it can jumpstart the Three Seas Initiative, and that's it. No further questions.
Yes, that's nice and concise. Thank you for the answer. See, we have a shared point of view within Visegrád. Nobody wants to make it bigger. To flip the question around, if there is no horizontal enlargement, how about the possibility of further, deeper institutionalization? Zsombor, your mic is still on. How about deeper institutionalization? I mean, for the audience, the V4 has only one standing institution. This is the International Visegrád Fund, which has been operating for more than 20 years from now, but no other standing institutions have been set up so far. So I would be really interested to hear your opinion about the perspective of, if not widening, then how about deepening the V4 cooperation? Łukasz, what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think Zsombor and I've been writing about the Three Seas Initiative and the role of Secretariat there and potential questions. I think thinking about it in this context, I don't think that there is also really much appetite. I think from a point of view of the Three Seas Initiative, that's what we've been writing with Zsombor, is like that we've seen that there was a big advantage. It was a bit of a different outside perception of the Three Seas Initiative when the Estonians decided to have a secretariat, even though it was not a Three Seas secretariat. It was that the Estonians decided to dedicate a national secretariat to the whole issue. In that regard, I think that was a very beneficial introduction. But I think that is also the reason for that is also that after all, the Three Seas Initiative is a lot bigger. It has a very kind of focused. It has fewer layers, and it has a much more focused direction or a much more focused agenda. I think I find it a bit difficult to imagine how that would actually improve the Visegrád cooperation to have a fixed secretariat, because I think the flexibility. I mean, of course, Zsombor was saying quite rightly that of course there is consultation of the presidency programs and so on and so on. But after all, there is a bit of space for national kind of flavor for each presidency, and I think, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I have the impression that secretariat would probably cause far too much entanglement and permanency and maybe some too much structure that would kind of bog down this flexibility. But maybe I'm wrong on that.
Thank you, or maybe not. Thanks. Vitek?
Yes. Well, I don't think that there is an appetite for deepening of the Visegrád cooperation in the Czech Republic. Definitely, there is not it is not expected that the Visegrád group should have any kind of a secretariat. The quasi-institutionalization we've got in the V4 is perceived as something sufficient, and the main question rather is whether we may deepen the cooperation in the sense of the scope of the policies we discuss and we cooperate on. And again, here I think that there is as well a problem ahead of us. The V4 was quite successful in the cooperation within the EU after the EU enlargement. And that was also thanks to the fact that we shared many problems together. There was a more tangible division between the Western European members and the Central and Eastern European members in 2005, 2006, 2007. We had the transition periods for the free movement of labor. We had less integrated energy infrastructure and other issues which nowadays are more or less solved. Though this East-West divide is the topic of the past 5 years. But still, because of migration, of course, but still more and more issues are of the East-West divide from 2004, 2005 are solved. And that implicates for me that we will have less and less issues where the V4 would have from the very beginning a similar position. We will differentiate. We will find partners in other corners of the European Union if we are able to do so, and if we invest into the diplomacy with also other EU members. Therefore, I do not think that there will be much deepening of the cooperation in the policy area as well. But you never know. Before 2015, I wouldn't say that the Visegrád cooperation would cooperate so closely on the migration issue, and it happened, at least at the highest political level. The similar, I also was curious about any cooperation with the health security in the past year, but it did not happen. And I'm quite surprised that the Polish V4 presidency did not invest into this area at all, or it was not much visible. I didn't see any initiative from the Polish presidency or from any other V4 country that the V4 should cooperate somehow on the health security, vaccination, COVID passes, COVID passports, and things like that. But you never know. There might be some new issue which might surprise us in the future.
Thank you, and thank you also for pointing out that there have actually been real success stories in policy coordination. I mean, one of the most spectacular ones have been the issue of energy interconnectors that have been constructed after the 2009 Ukraine gas crisis. which severely hit many of the Visegrád countries. And from then on, the construction of north-south interconnectors have just sped up because there was a mutual interest behind. And of course, very right point, and I really took note of that in terms of combating the COVID-19, so far not much has been done on a V4 frame in a V4 framework. Hopefully, there's a chance to change that. But just to go on with the question of further deepening, Tomáš, anyways, the International Visegrád Fund is operating in Bratislava. As you said, Slovakia is the only country that has been sharing borders with all other Visegrád partners. How does it look like from the Slovak perspective? Would there be a need for any further institutionalization, any more deepening? Thank you.
I would say that this loose institutionalization, as we call it, or I would put it in a different way, I would call V4 as an informally institutionalized initiative. So there are many informal institutions. Some of them already have become more formal, I would say, in the course of the development of the last years. But still, this loose institutionality brings more advantages than disadvantages to V4 countries. Because, for instance, when you look at the political level, and we can criticize the political level and political leaders, but it is necessary to have political dimension of the Visegrád cooperation for its development. It's not possible to reduce the V4 to the grand scheme, you know, of the Visegrád Fund, or just to soft aspects. If the regional initiative is going to remain and be preserved, then this political dimension is needed as well. So the political elites meet, they do adopt declarations, but these declarations are not legally binding. So I would see it as the advantage of the Visegrád cooperation, because we can then work on a lower levels and come to some other type of agreements on a lower level, while we can concentrate on the issues of the joint interest. If we would be centrally, you know, organized and a rigid regional format, then it would mean for the V4 a danger, I would say, because it would lead us to adopt joint statements and joint actually agreements. And on some issues, it's not only the case of the future of the European project, maybe, but also several other issues, yeah, like the relations to China, with China or with Russia, in which we do not share really the same positions. And this weak institutionalization enable us not to reach, not to have the joint positions on everything. It also avoids us from being called the bloc. The V4 is not the bloc, it's the coalition of the willing. Of course, the reputation of the V4 is the blocking coalition sometimes in the EU, but when looking at the essence of the cooperation, it's not the bloc, it's the coalition. So I think this is the wishful development, to maintain and to preserve the V4 as it is, loosely institutionalized, flexible, and concentrated on the issues of joint interest. And I think that this should work then.
Thank you. Zsombor, how does it look like from your perspective?
I'd strictly separate what you've said, deepening and institutionalization. And I have an answer. Tomáš, you talked about the top-down approach. I think it's high time to see something of a bottom-up approach. And, you know, basically this, in my imminent neighborhood, so to speak, there have been a couple of recent developments. And I'd like to mention one thing. A Polish institution came up with a fantastic atlas of the V4 that combines geographic, population, and so basically hard data together in a separate book that's called Atlas Visegrádsky, so Visegrád Atlas, that will come out in the forthcoming month. I think the publication is available online already in Polish and in English. And these type of cooperations and these type of results, I think we definitely need. Concerning the institution, so basically I see this as a form of deepening the cooperation. Concerning the institutionalization, I more or less agree completely with what you said, but I have a small comment. So in 2016, in the 8th district of Budapest, there has been a new institution set up called Visegrád Patent Institute. And András, basically, based on your background and your peculiar attention to details, just the sole fact that you do not know of this institution seemingly does a lot about, the institution's activity and basically prospects. Concerning the International Visegrád Fund, I have 2 comments. I think it was Vít who mentioned that earlier on in the golden ages, the Visegrád cooperation was active in the Western Balkans. Since a separate institution called the Western Balkan Fund was actually activated and was created, that basically serves or trying to serve the same role as Visegrád, International Visegrád for the Balkan countries, I think that the Visegrád Fund, strictly speaking, lost ground. And basically, the other main area of focus for the IVF was the Eastern Partnership countries. But the situation is this: that the V4 countries, neither the V4 countries nor the International Visegrád Fund cannot scrape off these. Members are members of the EU as well. And the EU is losing ground in the Eastern Partnership countries, losing ground in Belarus, in Ukraine, and in the Caucasus as well. So basically, what I can see is a specialization of the International Visegrád Fund for countries, for areas, for small, areas of cooperation in the neighborhoods concerning the high political level discussion, especially after COVID-19. I'd really like to see something that boosts R&D development, basically just following the footsteps of, for instance, the V4 Republic of Korea, South Korea cooperation, something that is tangible, something that actually, adds towards an economic recovery in the Visegrád countries.
Thank you, Zsombor, and thank you for all of you for these very comprehensive answers. And now we are in the lucky situation that we received quite many questions in the chat. I would take the liberty to kind of do a bit of cherry picking of them in order to try to set up some logic between the questions, so to structure the questions along a certain logic. And the certain logic I'm suggesting is to move from more harder questions to the softer ones. And along this logic, I would like to read out first the question of Christian Zatevsky. He asked about, do you see any development area in the common defense acquisition of the V4 armies? So to widen the question a bit, how do you see the perspectives of security and particularly defense industrial cooperation within the V4? Please, the floor is yours. Whoever wants to answer, just please do it.
I've done a quick search about this, and what I've found is a recent news that there has been a joint procurement of ammunition in between the V4 countries. And that's, I think, concerning the scope of this, it's really, basic / small, but it's definitely a sign that something is going on. It has been an issue. Basically, I'm not an expert of military security, but, what I've seen and what I've heard recently is that, the armies, for instance, the Polish army, which has a completely, which needs to operate in completely different military environments, in relation to the size of the country and the physical, neighborhoods of the country, is way bigger than other countries. It's time to time, the issue just raises up or resurfaces the surfaces, but in the end, it's a political decision.
Thanks. Tomáš, anything to add?
Well, I think just to follow up on this political issue, I think we have, I think more low key projects are probably, if at all, more likely to take place. I think we also have, in terms of procurement, a much more politicized partnerships. I think András, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Hungary likes to shop around in Germany quite a lot, especially in recent years. Poland has a very particular focus on US procurement. I think we've seen with the change of government in Poland in 2015, a lot of the political problems that can come with larger projects like the Caracal helicopters, which were initially bought from France, then was cancelled. So I think it's a lot of high politics with the bigger procurement projects. I mean, of course, joint procurement is a no-brainer, and it always sounds great, but I think we have all these political strings attached especially with defense sector cooperation, that will make it a bit tricky.
Thank you, Łukasz. Tomáš, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, perhaps 2 sentences. I think the limited number of positive examples when it comes to the really concrete areas of cooperation in the field of security and defense are also connected with the fact that the Visegrád as such is rather a soft power than a hard power. This is first. The second is that perhaps the most visible example of cooperation in this field is the joint battle group, which will again be formed actually and put into action, I think in 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. But otherwise, there are definitely much more declarations than concrete results when it comes to the procurement of issues. I would rather see the added value of the Visegrád cooperation and the Visegrád framework in joint trainings, perhaps, and the exchange of this kind of experience. So that would be my point. Thanks.
Thank you. Vít, anything to add?
Well, I basically agree with all what was said. We had this time with when there were many declarations and ambitious plans about the joint procurement policies, but the structure of the military industry in the V4 countries, if there is any, and the national preferences make these things complicated.
Thank you. And now with defense and security put aside, let's move to the fields of kind of foreign policy. We get a question from Panna Solyom. She asked that how successful is the collaboration in the field of joint candidacy? Were there any successful joint candidates of the V4 for important positions within the European Union? So have you been successful in lobbying somebody to get some kind of a position within the EU? Do you happen to have any info on that? Anybody? Vít?
Yes, actually Ursula von der Leyen, she was declared as the V4 candidate after the hot summer of 2019. And it sounds like an anecdote, but that was the result of the battle in which the V4 was involved, or at least 3 countries of the V4, because I have never figured out what was the position of the Social Democratic Prime Minister of Slovakia, Pellegrini, whether he was supporting Franz Timmermans or whether he was not supporting Franz Timmermans, in fact. But anyway, there was one case in which the V4 was dragged in, and indeed Ursula von der Leyen is thankful for the fact that she's the president of the European Commission even twice. There was the support from the V4 for her candidacy in the European Council, and then she got the support in the European Parliament also thanks to the votes coming from the Law and Justice members of the European Parliament from Poland and the Fidesz parliamentarians as well. So that was one case, but perhaps my colleagues could add some diplomatic candidacies.
I was really hoping for this answer. Anybody else to add, Tomáš?
I would just say that regrettably, the list of those candidates who were not, or candidacies that were not supported by the V4 countries is much longer, and we can name a couple of examples from the recent years. But on the EU level as well, I would say.
Zsombor, Łukasz, anything to add?
I don't know anything about high politics and successful, support towards one politician, but I've heard of that inside the framework of the Horizon 2020 program. Visegrád, basically institutions from Visegrád countries are successfully lobbying in Brussels to get basically more money, more institutional power / basically designated places. But these are sectoral, and I have the general remark that these are going on. Concerning how successful they are, that's another question, but I've heard of positive outcomes in this field.
Thanks. Łukasz?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, nothing substantial to add. I mean, I remember, Tomáš mentioned, the negative examples. I mean, there was a bit of excitement in the foreign affairs press about, the next Secretary General of the UN might be coming from the Eastern Europe group. I mean, we don't like the Eastern Europe label, but that's how we're grouped there. I mean, we all know how that ended. So yeah, I'm afraid we are not that amazing at this point. And I think there was some recent reporting as well that generally the representation of the eastern half of the European Union and institutions is also still leaving much to be desired. So yeah, for further improvement.
Yes, room for further improvement. That's the magical expression here. To go further along the logic of from harder topics to the softer one, it has been mentioned many times already how crucial was the 2015 migration crisis or refugee crisis in shaping the development of the V4. We got a question about, okay, that was 6 years ago. What is the situation right now? So how do you see the question of migration or handling migration within the V4? What's your take on that? Anybody? So how the V4 is addressing the question of handling illegal migration? Okay, if not, we can.
Can I just say something? If nobody is willing to
please,
respond.
Tomáš, sure.
Well, I just think that it seems that the position towards the the migration quotas remains the same. So more or less that there is an opposition to any centrally planned distribution of migrants in the European Union. But here I would also mention also some constructive actually examples, like the support of the V4 countries to the EU Fund for Africa, for instance, or the significant support to the Frontex and the initiatives that are related to the protection of the external border. So this also need to be mentioned, and the overall actually support to the issue of flexible, so to say, solidarity. That would be the three I would like to mention.
Thank you. Vít?
Yes, well, last year we had there was the presentation of the new migration pact by the European Commission, and immediately there was the reaction from the Visegrád group. Again, three prime ministers only, but Gormatovič was represented by Andrej Babiš at that meeting. Immediately flew to Brussels and met with Ursula von der Leyen and expressed their objections to the new asylum and migration pact, which is now being negotiated. And we will see what happens in next weeks and months, whether we will have again a joint Visegrád position on that when it comes to the closer to the finalization at the council. We will have the elections in the Czech Republic in autumn, and it seems to be a topic which might be used for such a purpose. So this is definitely an issue to be followed, but of course it is overshadowed by the health crisis and the coronavirus epidemic right now.
Thank you, Vít. Łukasz, Zsombor, anything to add?
I can quote basically once again both of the strategic documents, both the Hungarian and the Polish national security strategies. If I remember correctly, the Hungarian strategy mentions migration and illegal migration in an extensive way. On the other hand, its Polish counterpart, I think, deals with the issue in 5 lines maximum.
Different perspective, different strategies. Łukasz?
Yeah, I think that yeah, I mean the issue was never as politicized, I think, in any of the three other countries as it was in Hungary. That was a whole other level. But I mean, the issue has, as you rightly said, the health crisis has made this topic kind of disappear in a way from an active political issue to more of a passive one. That if something pops up on the EU level, I think there is, as Vít rightly pointed out, the kind of mobilization to push back against anything, but it's no longer this kind of active political issue that is politicized in that regard.
Thank you. We got a question from István Német. I'm not going to read out the whole question because it's a long one, but it's basically about the role of V4 in the EU foreign policy. Mr. Német mentioned as an example the Marshall Plan idea for Belarus, or the possible enlargement towards the Western Balkans. So let me just extend the question a bit. How do you see now the role of the V4 Visegrád cooperation within EU foreign policy? Because what worries me to a certain extent is that what we see in Eastern Europe. I mean, Belarus, particularly since last year, has been closing down towards any cooperation with the West. There are massive repressions going on, and the possibilities of any active actions within Belarus are getting much more limited than they had been before. Look at Armenia and Azerbaijan and the war last year, which also fundamentally reshaped regional security environment. Look at the crisis in Georgia. So from my perspective, how I see it is that the opportunities of the V4 to be active or to get engaged in the Eastern Partnership region are getting a lot narrower than they have been a few years before. So comes the question, how do you see the V4's perspective vis-a-vis the Eastern Partnership region or towards the Western Balkans? Who would like to start?
Yes, I see the problem when it comes to the Eastern Partnership, because we've got a very specific position of Hungary towards Ukraine and towards Russia. So, there are many contradictions, mainly on the axis where one end is represented by Poland and the second end, which is very far away, is represented by Hungary. So I don't think that there is a room for any substantial cooperation when it comes to the Eastern Partnership. When it comes to the Western Balkans, of course, that this seems to be easier because all 4 countries very much support the EU enlargement towards the Western Balkans. But we have to remember that example of a successful enlargement would attract more attention to another enlargement in Europe, and that is the case we are struggling with. Because many Western European countries are afraid of bringing into the European Union any other problematic member states with problems with the rule of law, for example. So first, I think we have to do our homework, and then we would be a good advertisement for another enlargement of the EU.
Fair point. Anybody else? Zsombor?
A few questions, a few comments on this. First and foremost, the Visegrád 4 is a part of the EU. I'm sorry to say it, like this. I do not want to be blunt, meaning that diplomats and other personnel bearing the citizenship of these countries might work and are working in the European External Action Service. my two questions regarding this: who are these people, and at what level are they working for the institution? So whenever we are talking about EU Foreign Service, who are those people who exercise the right to go there either or to do something? This is a question. I think I know a couple of Hungarian diplomats who are working in the EAS, but I have no idea, to be honest, about whether, you know, at higher positions there are any, you know, influential personnel coming from Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. This is the first. The second is what Tomáš said about the issue of credibility. I don't want to restate the whole thing. The third is whenever we are talking about EAP and the connection EAP countries had with the Visegrád Cooperation, the IVF, the International Visegrád Fund, is something we cannot, you know, work ourselves around. I'm trying to share something with you. It might be, so basically this is the 15th year anniversary yearbook of the IVF. That is an official publication, and you see basically the allocated funds throughout these 15 years for the fund. Interestingly enough, I do want to point your attention towards two things. Amongst the external partners, there's the Netherlands and there's the Republic of Korea, Sweden, United States, Germany, and so on, but meaning that these countries actually allocated some certain amount, some for IVF projects. The Netherlands is represented in the legend by this yellowish color, meaning that from this year on, I think it's 2013 or 2012, the Netherlands decided to allocate some money. But if you go a bit down, you see that in this very year, the Visegrád for Eastern Partnership Program just started. So it is, I think, you know, based on these raw data, that the Netherlands was likely to support Eastern Partnership countries inside the framework by basically boosting up the IVF. I don't know about the situation, how it goes nowadays, but I think whenever we're talking about, let's say, an extended work of the V4, I think this is a valid, this can be a valid option should there be partners for this. And this is where, the point of high politics and basically ongoing struggles in between various Visegrád countries and the various Western European counterparts could play a role in.
Thank you. Other colleagues, Tomáš, perhaps?
Well, certainly the role the Visegrád Fund is playing also in our neighborhood and in the EU's neighborhood should really be highlighted. I think the good news is that the fund's budget is going to be increased and these achievements have been noticed. But I would say that besides political support, we can also look on how to promote the cooperation on the group's level in different sectors. And here the list of concrete actions is very limited, I would say. So either we have bilateral projects or we have projects with other countries, but sectoral cooperation on the group's level is not that intensive, I would say. Where we do play the added value, and it's been mentioned already, is some procedural aspects of cooperation, like the export of know-how, to put it bluntly, be it the Western Balkan Fund, which needs further support, and I think is still the work in progress initiative, so to say, but also the CEFTA, Central European Free Trade Agreement, that was, the export article of the V4 towards the Western Balkans. And this all should go together with political support. But here, I think, especially when it comes to the Western Balkans, we do not have any hesitations or disputes or anything. So there is an unisono approval on the support of the Western Balkans. But I wish we got back on the track in case of the relations with the Eastern Partnership countries and with the Eastern Partnership as such, because here some bilateral issues really undermine the cooperation on the group's level, and it's actually not profitable to anyone.
Thank you. Łukasz, if you have nothing to add,
nothing,
good. Actually, Tomáš has just implicitly answered the question of Zsófia Nagy about the other fields of cooperation on social and economic and other levels. So let me ask, or actually read out another question, which is touching upon an aspect that we have rarely been speaking from Mr. Artur Safin. He's been asking about Visegrád cooperation possibilities on joint protection of nature, ecological balance, as well as transport, road infrastructure, all these. Though Mr. Safin has inquired about the pre-2004 aspects, so about the historical past, let me reformulate the question on how does it look like right now. Can you name successful Visegrád projects in the field of ecology, transport, road infrastructure, or what are the long-standing failures or commitments that long have not been met? Łukasz already mentioned the idea of the high-speed railways. That's a famously long story. Do you have any other examples in mind? Let them be successful or unsuccessful ones. Thank you. Ecology was something that really struck me as, wow, I've never thought about that in the V4 context, but the other ones are interesting as well. Who would like to start? Vít?
Yes, I cannot remember any, huge successful project. Also, when it comes to the infrastructure, you have to invest huge money into it, and in order to build something, and there you rely mainly on the European funds. You cannot put any substantial Visegrád element into it. Of course, you cannot speak about the IDF money, the Visegrád fund money. So far, you cannot speak about even about the Free Seas fund, which is being constructed, but still the money there is not enough. So you have to work with the European funds, and you have to calibrate your own national strategy on how to spend it. So I don't think that there is a room for Visegrád cooperation. There are some, points, some examples. When there is a discussion on the new plan for the Trans-European network, then there is a room for a debate also within the V4 format. There were even some initiatives in past, like the letter of the Visegrád countries to the European Commissioner responsible for transport regarding that. I'm not sure whether there was such initiative this time, because the new TNT network is being debated. But when it comes to the environment, or more broadly speaking, to the climate, I think we are now experiencing some kind of decarbonization of our economies in the V4. We are on this way, which will be very long, but I think that this is something we can share. This experience is something we can share with other countries in the European neighborhood, mainly in the Western Balkans. The process of the European integration of the Western Balkans must incorporate also this decarbonization and the climate goals. And it will be very difficult for some countries to follow them. Same case here, in Central Europe. It is also difficult to follow the CO2 goals set on the European level, and we have much of talk about how difficult and how expensive it is. But I think there is something, some new topic we can and new experience we will be able to share with the Western Balkan countries or even Eastern Partnership countries.
Thank you. Zsombor?
Two things. Just basically browsing through really quickly the 15-year anniversary yearbook that I've mentioned earlier of the IVF. There's a separate category, quotes, environment and climate change. So there are definitely projects. There were definitely projects that the IVF supported in this category. Personally, I do not know anything about these projects on a V4 level, but interestingly enough, on a bilateral Polish-Hungarian level, I do. In Hungary, a couple of years ago, maybe about, I don't know, I cannot say it, a gene bank for European bisons was set up. And basically the donor was the Polish state. Because in Europe, besides Hungary, I think the last population that lives is in Poland and in Belarus. And the Polish side donated something for, I think, for preservation reasons.
Thank you. It's good to remember the bisons. Yes. Anybody else? Tomáš, perhaps?
Yeah. Also 2 points, if I may. Of course, our countries, some of our countries are more ambitious, some of them are less when it comes to, green policy and the goals. It's also connected with the differences in our energy mixes. So I would say that any joint attempts are more than welcome on this level. And there are examples of political coordination as well. When we go down to the level of local authorities, I would like to mention the initiative of the mayors of the capitals, of the 4 capitals of the V4 countries related, to the green cities agenda and smart cities. So there certainly is, the knowledge about these needs also on the local level. So the Visegrád is not only, as it was said, about top political leaders meetings, but also on, huge number of other types of meetings, including the representatives of local government. So this can be one of the initiatives, and of course the Visegrád countries can serve as the role model to the partners in the Western Balkans or in the East when it comes to energy efficiency, for instance, when it comes to the housings and the renovation of the buildings. Here we have the achievements that can be shared, for instance. So again, when we go down, then we have more examples of this successful cooperation. And definitely the green agenda is also connected to the recovery plans that are now being prepared and discussed in the V4 countries. So I would also say that there is certain space of cooperation when it comes to this process, the preparation of the recovery plans.
Thank you. Łukasz, anything to add?
I mean, I think in terms of examples, I can only think of rather negative ones from very recent times when we had the Czech Republic announcing legal action against Poland because of coal mines in the immediate vicinity, and the little bit between Poland, Germany, and the Czech Republic. So Visegrád cooperation didn't help much there.
We cooperate where we can, and we don't cooperate when we can't. So my last question, because our time is really running to the end. We got a question from Mr. Nikita Sharma. Do you believe that there are other strings holding together the V4 brand than the opposing ideas of Brussels? Let me reformulate this question as kind of a farewell question or whatever. In short, if you would have to explain to someone coming from Mars or whatever alien planet, what is that's holding the Visegrád cooperation together? What's the main cohesion, the most important thing? Why are we doing all that? So what would be your short answer? Vít?
Yes, yeah, that's the question I very often get, and as a proponent of the Visegrád group, I always have to position myself somewhere between the two ends of the Czech debate, or between those who love the V4 for what it is not, and those who hate it for what it is not. in fact. I think that we have to look at the Visegrád cooperation as on a success story. Historically, Central Europe has always been rather a source of conflict than a source of solutions. You know, many religious, national conflicts started here in our region. We were always ready to, or very often ready to, put more oil into the fire rather than put it out. Others solved our problems very often to our displeasure. And I think that the Visegrád is one of the tools how to prevent these situations. The V4 cooperation helped us to join the EU, and you know we have to also look at the EU enlargement as a moment which not only meant the unprecedented integration of Europe, but also unprecedented integration of Central Europe. And this is for me, you know, a value per se. You know, many call for leaving the Visegrád group in the Czech Republic, and my question always is, what we would have instead of that? You know, similarly as Tomáš said, we cannot escape from Central Europe. It will be always there. We cannot play. We cannot play with geography, and we will need good relations with our neighbors, including Hungary, our symbolic neighbor. And the Visegrád cooperation is the best tool we have invented for that.
Thank you, Vít. So, Zsombor, if you need to explain it to somebody completely alien, what's holding the Visegrád together?
The experience that we kind of learned how to cooperate with each other.
Short and brief and nice. Okay, Łukasz?
I would say, well, I'd agree with Vít in terms of geography. My main point: we're neighbors. We have to work together. I feel a bit reminded of the that made me laugh. The tweet by Matovič, the Slovak Prime Minister, who tweeted out on the anniversary, on the 30th anniversary, that we don't cooperate by choice, but because we must, or something like that. You can interpret that statement in a lot of different ways, but ultimately, yeah, there is you know, there is little alternative.
Okay, thank you. And as Matovič was quoted, Tomáš, what are your thoughts? How to explain the Visegrád?
I'm not going to comment on the tweets of our Prime Minister and Facebook statuses. Well, that's the statement for the beginning. No, really, I think it is both the platform for coordination and consultation. And if we do not reach, you know, the coordination, we always have, you know, the consultations. And it also brings some benefits to the countries of the V4. And plus, there are people-to-people contacts, intensive ones. So I think that it's an informal, more than formal thing, which is the added value per se.
Thank you very much. This has been really good closing words. So our friend from the Marsh is happy now and understands what the Visegrád is about. So dear colleagues, thank you once again for accepting the invitation. This has been a really fruitful 120 minutes. I've taken 6 pages of notes, which is taken into account my ugly handwriting. That's quite an achievement. So I'm really grateful to all of you. And then I leave the ugly job of saying goodbye to Dóra Göncberger. So now the floor goes back to Dóra. From my side, thank you once again. Dóra, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you, András, for taking on this wonderful job of being a discussant for this incredibly stimulating and interesting discussion. And of course, a big thank you goes to Łukasz, Tomáš, Vít, and Zsombor for accepting their invitation, and for the audience for keeping up with us. And for those who stayed, I'd like to thank you for your attention. This discussion was recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So please check our Facebook page for you'll see the link there. And also, I'd very much like to see you at our next event. So if you enjoyed the conversation today, please do sign up, like our Facebook page. It's called Pázmány International Club, as we advertise our events there. As I said, I'd very much like to see you there, and I hope to see you at our next events. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful and restful evening ahead. Bye.